Okay, so if we're antennas, antennas
bounce off what's projected to them, and they forward. They don't produce it.
right. David's saying they just are receptacles for energy rather than producing energy. But there have to be, there are machines that produce energy through, it takes in energy, but it also puts it out. So you're circulating energy or transporting energy. And in that process, we have to be affecting energy, right? So if we're antennas and we are energized from the sun or from the atmosphere or vibrations, sound, then our DNA is the language inside that receives that information. And then we convert that energy through thinking and meditating.
Hey, bro.
We convert those energies into intentions of some type or reservations or some kind of produce. There's got to be fruit of us taking in the energy. We're always converting it because nothing's ever static. So we're always converting energy and putting it out. And if we're antennas that way, which makes sense, right? Then we can broadcast what's inside of us through sound or intention, if there's collective consciousness, or if consciousness has, we can affect that dimension, which I believe we can. If plants can talk to each other without words, then certainly we can, right? So we can affect the outside. I had a conversation with Doug Vogt about this when I was learning the Hebrew alphabet from him and learning about how supposedly when Moses received the tablets, that information was a computer code system or a program a language. So probably like it was the language like DOS or whatever, like if you're looking at it from a computer. So it was the language that would allow you to understand and to discern and to interpret life. And so this language that Moses left, according to Doug's interpretation, was wild. There were 38,000 some hundred, I think 38,000, maybe 400 some forms, letters that made up the Yetzirah or the life. And those letters, Moses, which we'll say Moses, but he was a late advanced Bronze Age man if he lived. But whatever, the purpose of the story is to say that he was bringing the language to us, the Hebrew language, from the last earth age before the cataclysm. And so these tablets held what really was a code more than commandments. Commandments was that surface story that they used to communicate to normal people that they just wanted to give a religion. And so they just used that to communicate this code of numbers and letters. And so when I was learning from Doug, Moses or whoever had so many letters, 300, whatever the number is I just said. And there were no vowels at all. And he had to create a story and use the numbers in the story that would communicate to the decoder reader the number of years between cataclysms and the earth cycles, which is 12,068. And that number he communicated through 4 or 5 different ways. One way that I know of is that the numbers of chapters and verses in the original Hebrew text, the Jewish text, equaled that number. And there are several other ways to get to that number, but that is the root number in the Torah that you can almost read all the code in the other books when you understand that. And that comes from the measurement of the sacred cubit. And the sacred cubit was one of the things that Doug figured out. And I missed my thing on the letters. Maybe I can go back to that. But the sacred cubit, he was trying to figure out, he eventually did, by using the inch. He had to go to the British inch instead of the one that was being used, instead of the Egyptian one. And anyway, he figured it out. He measured his own hand, but the clue came from Ezekiel. That book is the only book that held the clue to how to figure out the measurement of the sacred cubit. And once you got that measurement, it opened up all the coding of the Torah. And so he figured that out. That allowed him to decode practically everything, and so many things. I think he had like 39 discoveries, and as is in, the Library of Congress for doing it, etc. Back to the letters, the cool thing about that is that when Doug deciphered the code, first he had to do a number of things, figure out a number of things astrologically, which he'd studied for a long time, and he had been studying the pyramids, so he had a lot of background on that. Plus, he came from a Jewish Orthodox family and had read the Bible over and over and over. But what led him to the answers was he and his friend back in the 70s were talking about how science really could not figure out anything basic. What's time? What's space? What's matter? They never knew that stuff. I always thought they did. Anyway, they were talking about how science would not reconcile the basic problems. And they said, well, maybe our paradigm is wrong. Maybe we're looking at things incorrectly. And so they started saying, well, maybe it's just an information system. That's what the universe is, information. And depending on your information is what you are. And the minute they started doing that, things started unraveling. So that's what allowed him to look at the 10 Commandments or the tablets in a different way. Besides the fact that he took 3 excursions out there with all kinds of experts and found the actual location of Mount Sinai, and he had a good understanding from being a journalist and long background. So the letters is strange and crazy. When you look at the decoded information, every letter is a vector of energy. And so every letter in the Hebrew alphabet is a toroidal, which is like a donut of energy that houses the atoms and etc. And these toroidals, everything's like a toroidal, everything like an atom, and then bigger, and then bigger. And then, it's like all those Roman dolls. That's how life is. It's built like that. It's built one thing inside another. That it's just like that. Everything's like a multiplication of the minor in a bigger way with the same capacities, just anyway. So the letters each had their own form. So depending on the XYZ axis of the atom, that would change the sound. And the sound would represent the letter. And so that's how we came up with the Hebrew language. Each letter is a vector of energy, or a toroidal of energy. And when you begin to see that, you can start to see how music started and all that. And that's why the Hebrews used to sing it. And that's how they handed it down. And what I would recommend the, what is it? The Yetz, I can't say the word, Sefer Yetzirah. I think it's the Sefer Yetzirah, but that's the lettering of life. And if you look that up, it's very, very cool. So then you can start to see the energies, and what Moses was giving us was a code, right? That would equate to everything. And anyway, it's very, very interesting. And I don't know how I got off. What were we talking about? Okay, so projecting. So if we're information systems, then we're like the pole, right? We're like the receiver. We're like the tower. And we take an energy from the sun, from the atmosphere, from vibrations in the air, from little toroidals all around us. And we take that in and we process it. Some not consciously, some consciously maybe. And we process it with our minds and with our bodies, and that energy permeates us, and it changes because of who we are, like putting, a drop in the ocean. The ocean's going to change the drop. So do we, because of our chemistry, and all of our chemistry is different to a degree because of our DNA, which is our information system. And so if we're taking that energy in and we're transmitting it out, and we are that tower, then we should be able to broadcast that information the way we want to. And if we know that we are constantly broadcasting who we are, what we want, how we see things, what we expect, we're constantly putting our own movie out there. And we're writing our own books. But if we don't know it, we're doing it by default. Like we live life by default, not on purpose. And so it starts to make sense to me how much power we have over our own lives. And if we can get in ourselves that we have that power over our own lives, and we all do that, what a great collective power might we have when we're broadcasting what we want instead of just by default to whatever garbage is fed into us. So if we are antennas, then we need to be aware of what energies are coming in, or definitely of what energies are going out. Because think about this. This is kind of cool. Malcolm Bindle and Randall Carlson, well, Malcolm mostly, but Randall was involved, came up with the thunderstorm generator, which converts energy with absolutely, or gas with absolutely no garbage. And so that's what we need to think about, is us doing that, is that we can take the gas in and use it and put it out without the garbage. I don't know. Yeah, I got a little buzz.